God used a door as a powerful image to say some things that He wants to say. One of the reasons is because obviously a door is a primary access. And so that access is not only when opened allow you to come in, but when closed is a deterrent. So a door is a major idea with respect to God. For instance, God said through Jesus, and His words were, "I am the door of the sheep." Now I read somewhere, the ones who have done that work all their lives, they would say, or they said, that when you find a place for the sheep at night, the shepherd lay down in the gate so the sheep won't leave. I did not know that. That's a fascinating thing. So in fact, the shepherd is indeed the one preventing the sheep from leaving and the one who keeps the wolves from coming in. So the door concept with respect to the family of God is extremely interesting and important. But the other way that God uses the word door is with the concept of opportunities. 3 times in the New Testament, the Bible talks about the opportunities, the door of opportunity. So tonight, in our Bible reading, I want us to think about where Paul said, there was this door opened for me. And I want you to think with me about how we should be looking for the door. Now, God is in the door opening business. That's just who He is. Jesus said in Revelation chapter 3 and in verse 8, "I have set before you an open door," He said to one of those churches of Asia, "and no one can close it." When God opens a door, it stays open. That is, no one has the ability to stop it. But God is in the door opening business. Let's think about this for a minute. What does that mean? God is, well, how can He do that? How is it that it is God's purview to open a door? Well, think about what happened in 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. When God sent Samuel to anoint the king, and King David was going to be the one, and he filtered through all the brothers, and he finally got to David. But at the beginning, Samuel said in his own mind, "Oh, this has got to be the one, because look how rugged and tall and handsome he is." And God says in verse 7, God does not look on man as men do, for God looks at the heart. The first thing I would say to you that makes God the one to open doors is the fact that God is the only one who can read hearts to know when the door is open. It may appear to us that a door is not open, but with God, He knows the hearts. So since God is able to see the heart instead of the outside, He looks at that first, that's only, then He has the ability to know to open the door. Number 2, why does He open a door? Because in doing so, He is faithful to His promise. Jesus said, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open. Everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds, and to him who knocks, it is open." Matthew 7, 7 and 8. So God's promise is, if I am a seeker, He will honor that seeking. In other words, if I am outside and I am looking for the door, He will open it. That's what God does. I think that is interesting. I think it is interesting to consider how that vision of that verse may be. It is Jesus standing inside and saying to those on the other side of the door, if you ask, if you seek, if you knock. And so it is Jesus from the inside making a promise that if you ask and seek and knock, He will open the door. That's why God is in the door opening business. But the second thing we need to see with doors of opportunity is this: I must be in the open door finding business. That's my job. God's job is to open the door, and my job is to find the open door. Now the question is then, number one, how am I going to find the door? How am I going to know when the door is open? Well, the first thing you have to do in the open door finding business, you have to be looking. You have to be looking. I'm afraid the biggest problem with the doors of opportunity is the fact that Christians are not paying attention. They're not looking. I've done many door knocking opportunities. In fact, this past week in Paris, the preacher up there wanted to knock doors. And we walked around the building where they meet, and I showed him a way that I have done it in the past. We actually at that time picked up 2 opportunities for further study. I don't think door knocking is dead. I think that we're afraid of it, but I don't think it's dead. But I don't think it's as popular as it used to be either. It doesn't work as well, but it still has value. But I remember when I first was listening to people teaching how to knock doors, they gave one example of how not to do it. Knock, knock, knock. The person comes to the door, and the one standing in the door says, "You don't want to study the Bible with me, do you?" And the person, sort of mesmerized, goes, "No, I don't." That doesn't qualify as looking for an open door. You looked to have the door open, but you didn't want to find the open door. So the biggest problem with the door of opportunity is when we don't look for it. Now, having said that, how do we do it? Well, let's begin with these thoughts. If you are going to look for the door, what is it that has to happen in order for us to be able to see it? The first thing is, I have to be transformed continuously into thinking like God. The more I know His mind, the more I will have the chance of seeing the door. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God. This is your reasonable service. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by renewing your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. I need to be transforming my mind to think like God thinks, because only when I do that will I be able to see the door, to know where the door is. God's mind is becoming my mind. The more I do that, it gives me a greater chance to be able to see that door. Number 2, worship helps me see God's open doors. When I make worshiping with the people of God a priority of my life, it attunes me to honoring God so that I will pay attention to doors that open. In Ephesians 5 and verse 17, in the context of worship, he said to understand what the will of the Lord is. I don't think it is by accident that in that section that talks about honoring God through singing, he also says to understand the will of the Lord. I think that when we worship as we are supposed to, when we truly worship, we understand God's will more because I'm involved in honoring Him in that way. Number 3, if I'm going to be able to see the open doors that God sets in front of me, then I need to be a thankful person. In Colossians 1, or in 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 18, he says, be giving thanks in everything. Be thankful all the time. We are people who need to be thankful people. When I am in an attitude of thankfulness, I can receive from God that open door. You know, not being thankful cuts off the opportunity to receive. If I'm not a thankful person, I can't receive anything. And so if I am thankful, I can receive from God the doors that He opens. Number 4, I need to pray. Colossians 1:9, that's what Paul said. I am praying for you. He was praying for an open door with those people. When was the last time that you prayed, Lord, put me in the presence of someone today that needs to hear the gospel? Give me the opportunity to teach them. Help me see an open door. Give me courage to enter it. How often do you pray those kinds of things? If you are looking for an open door, then you will be praying that God will show that to you. And a final thing that we do in order to see God's open doors, let us flood our language with the words of James in chapter 5, or chapter 4 and verse 15, when he said, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. If I am constantly referring to the Lord's will, if the Lord wills, then I am constantly, by saying that, I am reminding myself to stay faithful to God. There might be times when it looks like a door is open, but in fact, it's that angel who's transforming himself to an angel of light. You know, the devil has things he does too. But if I am looking for the will of God, if the Lord wills, then I will be more conscious of the doors that are consistent with the will of God. Now, these are the things that will help me be an open door seeker. But now I want to show you from Paul where the open doors happen to be. Begin with me, if you will, in 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and in verse number 12. Notice what Paul said. Furthermore, when I came to Troas to preach Christ's gospel, and a door was opened to me by the Lord. The first thing that I need to know is where to find the doors that God opens. He opens 3 kinds of doors, 3 places to look. Number 1, look where you are. Paul said there was an open door that came to him when he got there. There he was. He came for the purpose of preaching. He came to that city, and right there he opened a door. Let me tell you something. There are open doors from the Lord in this room tonight. That's just fact. There are open doors. Now, God opens all kinds of doors. Some of them might be evangelistic. Some of them might be benevolent. Some of them might be peace and compassion and care, forgiveness, all kinds of doors. There are doors that are open in this room tonight. There's a door opened by the internet that we are broadcasting. Talked to a woman this morning. There's a congregation in the middle of nowhere in Ohio where her parents are members. Their preacher, whose wife died 6 months ago, decided to retire at 85. They have 40 or 50 people. They can't find anybody to come. They are asking, is it okay if we assemble as a church and tie in to the worship at Richmond and participate? That's an open door. That's an open door. And if we were not blessed with the kinds of people that we have to make that possible, then we could not have fulfilled that door. But now that's an open door. Just found out today that we're going to be pursuing. Isn't that neat? There are open doors in your neighborhood. There are open doors at your work. There are open doors at your place of recreation. God opens doors right around you. We need to be looking for them. We need to be praying about them. And we need to walk through. God opens other doors. Look at Acts chapter 14. Acts chapter 14. Look at verse 27. When they had come and gathered the church together, they reported all that God had done with them, that he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. This is Paul's reporting of his missionary journeys. God opens doors far away from you. We are blessed because David Pear has heard the call of the open door in Guyana, and he's willing to go. Not all of us will go. Not all of us can go. But every one of us goes when David goes. And it's an open door, not near us. We had a visit a couple of weeks ago from a man who is heavily involved in World Bible School. This is something that I would love for us to be involved with. I've talked to Tim about it in the past. And World Bible School provides all the material, and they send out Bible lessons all over the world. And all they ask is for Christians in the U.S. or anywhere to grade them. Do you want to open or be involved in far away open doors? That's how you can do it. And there are open doors that God has for that. The most famous story of that, for my mind, I've told before. Some may not have heard, so I'll tell it again. Every one of you recalls the serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, the man who was a cannibal of the people that he killed. when he was sentenced, and the story was shown on television, one of our sisters in Christ in Texas said, "That's a man that needs the gospel." And she sent him, I believe it was the same set that we have out here, the John Hurt series Bible study course, in prison. And he took it. And a preacher of the Lord's church in Wisconsin went into the prison after a number of lessons and baptized Jeffrey Dahmer into Christ. Because one Christian far away thought she saw an open door. And God blessed it. Colossians chapter 4, verse 3. Starting in 2. Continuing earnestly in prayer, being vigilant in it with all thanksgiving, meanwhile praying also for us that God would open to us a door for the word to speak the mystery of Christ, notice, for which I am also in chains. God opens doors in the most unlikely places. Paul was in prison praying for an open door. Interesting. In a joking way, but there's a serious part to it. Someone asked, what happens when they outlaw certain preaching? What are you going to do? I'm going to preach it. In fact, the next Sunday I'm going to preach it, whatever it is. And if they haul me off to prison, we're going to start a prison ministry. Now, the point is, God opens doors in unlikely places. And just because it looks something that is opposed to God, may not be. Maybe God's going to work through that situation. In other words, God has open doors all over the place. They're right here. They're way out there. And they're in the most unlikely places. The question is not, does God open doors? The question is, are His people going to keep their eyes open, be alert to them, and then walk through them? That's what God says that Paul was writing to the Corinthians about open doors. Before we leave, if you need to get your life right with the Lord, if something we can do to help you in any way, that might be our open door to you. Will you let us know as you respond while we stand and sing?
Oh, how strange when